All right, let's bring in some analysis now. It's been a day of saying goodbye to Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. We're joined by cultural expert from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Dr Gugu Mazibuko, and a history lecturer also from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, apt, Kuthula Thwala. Let me start with you, Dr Mazibuko. Do you agree with Ayanda saying we've seen who Buthelezi was today, all the facets? It's been said that there would always be the religious element, the traditional element, and one of the outstanding sort of sights for me was the members of the SANDF carrying the body, and then this wall of Amabuthu meeting them in the stadium. And of course we saw the stately side as well. Do you think it was a fitting tribute to who he was?
Afternoon, Francis and viewers. Yes, I agree with everyone. This funeral was befitting for this man of magnitude, Prince Buthelezi. Yeah, his legacy is unmatchable, and he was wearing so many hats. And each arm was giving each other the space to perform what is expected from from Amabuthu, from Imbongi, from the priests and the bishops and the army at the end. I think we have witnessed a great history being written in our time.
Mr. Thwala, do you agree that everybody was given space to remember and pay tribute?
Definitely so. Firstly, good afternoon to you, good afternoon to the viewers, and thanks for having me. Today we witnessed the end of an era in our political times. What we saw today attested to the fact that it was an end of a life of somebody of big stature who compared among the tall figures in Africa and the world. You talk about Julius Nyerere, you talk of the likes of Kwame Nkrumah, you talk of the likes of Patrice Lumumba and so many African leaders. But here is a man who was able to make together many aspects of life to work harmoniously. He was able to mend African ways, also being able to infuse deep education, but also at the same time having ingrained Christian values. But everything was buttressed by his love for people, for him to be there at all material times whenever he was needed, where he exhibited natural genius. Here we were ending a life of a total strategist and a total tactician. Yes, indeed, a hero in our modern times has fallen.
Let me stay with you, Mr. Thwala. I mean, the president said something that everybody can agree with, despite something of a contested legacy across the country, that he had a significant impact on South Africa's modern history. How do you think the history of the IFP being born from the ANC was dealt with? In a way, he represented that intersection as the founder of the IFP, the president talking about how he learned from the great ANC leaders essentially how to lead.
I've said before to many media houses that here we had an African nationalist. People should be reminded that this was a person who was a confidant to Inkosi Albert Lutuli. Who is Albert Lutuli? Chief Albert Lutuli, the very first African to receive a Nobel Peace Prize. And then this is a person who learned a lot from him. I don't want to be drawn to the negativities because I've said that every country in the world has got its own dark history. Hence, South Africa was not spared of cataclysmic period, which at times involved the big name of the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. But one should understand that such cataclysmic incidences happened in the space of the war. But you should also agree to the fact that had it not been because of his high quality, the country would not have been where it is. People also need to remember that the IFP, through him, only joined the very first democratic elections only 2 days before those particular elections. Now people should also think what would have happened had the IFP not joined. And having also joined the elections, he participated as a mainstream participant in the government of national unity. We've seen him walking hand in hand with Nelson Mandela, ushering the tone of reconciliation and peace, which is positive. We remember him walking hand in hand with former President Thabo Mbeki to unveil the statue in Katoras, where we have no less than 900 names of the people who died during those turbulent times. So for us, it's a complete person that we must be thankful as the people of the world and be proud as South Africans that this is the man who did not only teach but also worked selflessly for the people. We understand that he carried with him what we call charisma, commanding a lot of following, which he did not exploit for self-gains, because we must also be aware that in whatever political setup, there are human innocent lives that need service delivery. Did he excel in that space? Yes. Did he excel even in the space of homeland? Yes, he did.
Yeah, and I think the stance of most of the speakers today was to say, yes, history happened. Let's not talk about that now, but let's focus on what happened thereafter, talking about, like you say, the IFP deciding to join that election and being part of the transition, and then him and Nelson Mandela finding each other in a sense. We'll get back to the history, but we're following this cortege now to the homestead, and the ceremony will be held just outside his final resting place in the cemetery there. Dr. Mazibuko, tell us a little bit about what you expect to happen alongside where he will be laid to rest today.
Okay, as we are witnessing the army escorting him to his homestead, but what we must also note is that you have seen that the Ibamba, the regent, is communicating with him, because it is our belief as Africans, as AmaZulu, that we need to communicate with the someone who has passed on, because we believe that his spirit is there. So he will be taken to the homestead, and then the army will finish the processes that belongs to them, and then after that the family will take over, because remember, this is Inkosi, so there are rituals that are being performed when Inkosi Buthelezi has passed on. Therefore the family will take over at the end, because there are rituals that have to be observed, but those are sacred for each and every family. But I'm so happy that this is going to take place at night, because Amakosi, they have to wake up the following day and look after their people. So this is indeed for Inkosi to take place at this time.
You were telling us earlier, in terms of the send-off, he's a young ancestor, so it's in a sense an initiation to the other world. Can you give us any sense of the types of things the family will say as he's laid in the ground?
Well, the one who is communicating with him, and of course I cannot disclose because there are rituals that are so sacred. But
Sure.
Whatever that will be taking place there, one thing that is important is that it is our belief that Amakhosi, they never die, but they just rest and they wake up and look after the nation. As you have already alluded to the fact that he's going to be the young ancestor. Yes, we are expecting him to look after the people of the Buthelezi clan as Inkosi Yaga Buthelezi. And we also know that he will come back and provide the spiritual wisdom to the people.
Mr. Thwala, talking about today as a historic day, can we talk about the people who were in attendance and spoken about in the same breath? So President Cyril Ramaphosa said along with Buthelezi, there were two people that really helped bring South Africa away from that precipice as we were transitioning, and that were the former presidents Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma. You often don't hear of them spoken together and seeing them together. So in a sense, this is history in the making, just for that reason.
Yes, I was about to tell you that. I don't know when last as South African people saw people, seen people from different political spectrum under one roof and singing in unison, pulling in the same direction. Today, they were all bowing their respects to the late Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi. And that speaks volume about the power that as a nation we have, as South Africans, that we were given in the form of producing leaders such as the late Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Not only that, everyone was given a space. It was indeed a sad and a somber moment, but then at the same time, a celebration of a life well lived. You look at the regiment, Amabuto, and they were doing things in a manner that was expected of them, since the person whose life cycle had ended, and somebody whose mortal remains are about to be consigned to the final resting place. Is somebody who was so much a participant and a chief commander of Amabuto KwaZulu. You should be aware that any traditional prime minister is the chief headman of the king. So he is the one who calls shot when it comes to the battlefield. And today we witness that, and no one can dispute that the way things happened. Also, as I've already spoken about the ingrained Christian values, we saw religious people also allowed to perform their duties equally so. So everyone is happy. I think when his soul rests, it will also help to water the roots of peace, water the roots of reconciliation.
Dr. Mazibuko, do you agree? Several of the speakers today spoke of that reconciliation that he wished for.
Oh, absolutely. All I can say, in summary, I can say today was about peace, unity, protection, preservation of values that were instilled by Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi.
If you've just tuned in, we're following the cortege, the motorcade leading the body of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi to the cemetery at his homestead, which will be his final resting place. You can see the red carpet is laid out in one of the blocks there. So we're following that, several kilometers to go, but not far away, although the pace is slow. Dr. Mazibuko, before we let you go, what was also spoken about today at length was his dignified persona, his respect for institutions, respect for the state, his stateliness in Parliament, the way he was a strong critic but always spoke respectfully, and this sense of decorum which came through today. But do you think his history, his upbringing, I mean, tell us about the things that informed a man who was today spoken of as the personification of dignity?
That's a very important question, because upbringing counts a lot in anybody's life. Prince Buthelezi was a very busy man, but he had sense of humor. He was very firm. He instilled good values, a truthful man, a man of integrity. But when you look back where he comes from, we have heard a lot about his mother, Princess Makoko, that she was always a jolly mother, singing, a good singer and a good storyteller. So we can connect his personality to his own mother. So I think the upbringing, it tells a lot about the particular individual, where he came from, where he grew up. And that is why his service today was consoling, because he stood for the truth. I was really touched, Francis, by the speech that was made by Inkosi Yagwabiela, when he said, we were sitting under the trees, but he made sure that he built the traditional courts for Amakhosi. So I can say that indeed a great tree of wisdom has fallen.
Mr. Thwala, all right, I know you have to go, so Dr. Mazibuko, I will thank you for your time and insight as always. Thank you for being with us. Mr. Thwala, let's pick up on some other things that were said about his mother, for example, informing his great respect for women, and the fact that he said they should be revered, and he spoke about against gender-based violence as well, and then also the aspect of speaking truth to power, and seemingly history will justify those views that he was outspoken, respectful but outspoken.
Yes, from the Zulu traditions and from the Zulu royal house, from time immemorial, there were individuals like Mkabayi Chama and Princess Makoko Zulu, who is a mother to the late chief, was one person who was able to instill the sense of Ubuntu among the people, which in our modern days will translate to the agenda of protecting and preserving Ubuntu amongst young girls. That is why I can describe the late Inkosi Mangosuthu Buthelezi not only as a historical recounter, but also a cultural practitioner extraordinary. And in doing so, this is the person who understood the problems of his people and had ideas to solve such problems, which thing he did with absolute grandeur.
And the president saying he upheld other traditional houses as well. So he was saying that we uphold all traditions. We don't only focus on the AmaZulu.
Yes, of course, many people learned from the late Chief Buthelezi. There was this narrative to say then that you think of the late Chief Buthelezi, you only think of one nation, which is the Zulu nation. People are confusing the reality that the Zulu kingdom is the biggest kingdom in Africa. So there's no way that anyone who is in Africa is not going to know about the Zulu kingdom. But for him learning, there are so many people in the parliament itself that learned a lot from him. he admired and respected the values of the stance of or the existence of traditional leadership. Maybe when it comes to the issues of how to deal, remember he's a maternal grandson to King Dinizulu. Maybe the pain that King Dinizulu suffered being arrested twice by the colonial intruders, that might have played a role in influencing the kind of a person that he emerged to be.
All right, if you've just tuned in, this is a visual, well, we're now on the blocks, but where the red carpet is laid out, the cemetery just outside the Buthelezi homestead, where Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi will be laid to rest. The SANDF prominent members chosen as pallbearers, they will walk in the casket, then the flag will be taken off and handed over to a representative of the family, and then essentially it will be a family affair, as Dr. Mazibuko said, very sacred, personal things. It will be said in terms of that send-off to the afterlife. We are following the cortege and we'll take you to the cemetery as soon as it arrives.